Hi, this is Phil, and I'm here to tell you all about the Capes and Lunatics Patreon. Get early access to all of our interviews, including the monthly Chichester Chats with writer and comic book legend DG Chichester, new episodes of classic Capes and Lunatics shows, including The Quantum Zone, This, That, or the Third, and many, many more specials, all completely uncensored. Access starts for $3 a month, full video when you pledge $5 a month. Check out the link in our show notes or go to patreon.com/CapesandLunatics. Hope to see you there.
This is DG Chichester, and you're listening to the Capes and Lunatics podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another monthly Chichester Chats. It's me, Phil. We may see Lilith here soon, but we also have, well, the man, of course, whose name is on the show. Hello, sir.
It's always fun to tune in and listen to me doing that radio announcing intro for you. I feel so like I should be walking down the street just talking to everybody like that at all times. So
we should get some drops from you for me to play randomly on like when we're doing our other show and just be like, this show is brought to you by Axel's Infernal, or this show is brought to you by this.
I'd love it. Yeah, I could be your like the guy who used to do the You've Got Mail, an AOL or something. I'll just randomly pop up with commercials and such. I just saw this weird Black Mirror episode. You ever watch that show?
I've been starting to binge it. I'm not up to the new season yet, but I've been.
They had one. The last season was sort of good, interesting shows, but not really their best, I thought. But this one started off with a banger where this woman gets this brain tumor operation, which is successful. But what they've done is they've uploaded her brain into the cloud essentially, so they can beam it back to her around the tumor. But then what they start to do is inserting commercials into her everyday talk, and she didn't know that was part of the service, so you'll mention coffee and she'll start to say, well, Phil, if you really like coffee, you should try Espresso 4000, it's the best, so we could be like that. Anyway, we're here to talk about the guy in red.
Yes, Daredevil. Yes. Well, we just got our last episode of season 1 of Daredevil Born Again. So did you finish the season?
I did. I just watched it actually last night with my wife and my son. So we wrapped it up, and it's really good. I wasn't on your on your real time review.
Great show. Yeah, no.
Yeah, I don't know where you guys landed. I didn't listen to every episode of the review yet, mostly because my feelings sort of remained consistent. It was. I cannot fault any performance. Every performance is top notch. There's no bad person in that bunch. They all know what they're doing. They know what they're landing, and they're landing the performances. There were moments of like the potential. I think the jailhouse scene with the guy who was robbing the bodega earlier stands out to me. That was like pure Matt pivoting around stuff. There was the last scene at the ball, the last episode before this one at the ball was really strong and stylistic, although I don't know why Bullseye was looking through a sight on a gun, and and then the ultimate feeling is just it was very competent. Like, it was competently done, but it did not elevate itself like the Netflix one did. I thought the Netflix one for me achieved some tons of stylistic choices and emotional stuff and filmmaking kind of prowess that I feel was off in this one. There was just there were just cuts. They were trying to do cross cutting that just didn't gel quite right. There were character inconsistencies. Bernthal is obviously amazing as the Punisher, but walking into that situation, just like he's Gru, the Wanderer, kind of going in for a melee contact. He's tactical. He's got to be ruthless and tactical, and they could have achieved the same thing they wanted, but not just have him brawl it out. That sort of set me wrong.
Mm.
And I continue to insist that the senses were badly represented. The hearing was well done, like, wow. But as far as I'm concerned, the guy only has super hearing, and he can spin around and throws his metal billy clubs. And I think that's a lost opportunity. So, and that speech at the end, again, not faulting Charlie Cox, but it didn't rise to the like Ride of the Rohirrim level I think they were kind of going for. It just was not for me. And I know there are lots of people who like. And it's exciting to see the character, in motion. It's exciting to see like new Daredevil episodes and new Daredevil, adventures and that, and obviously he's got a formidable villain, and so I get why people are totally jazzed. What was your guys' final conclusion?
I mean, we liked it, but I mean, I know Lilith and I were saying, the stuff we got in the last 2 episodes, why couldn't we get that maybe earlier in the season? And
Right. Yeah, and I don't know why it was called Born Again. I mean, you don't lift a title like that and not inject more of the source material, because I didn't even really get the born again-ness of it as much.
yeah, no, I mean, Marvel has a habit of doing that. They just take, a title people know and slap it on something. I don't think it ever has anything to do with the source material.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, they did blow up his apartment, so
right. That shot was actually almost like the angle on it was pretty much the panel. It's got that same angle, the same effect. You blow up the apartment, but again, blow up the apartment. And like screw with them the whole time. And tear him down, and then have him reverse again. In other words, again, do Born Again. But I'm not going to fault it for that. I'm not going to fault it that it didn't align with that. I'm faulting it really mostly, like I said, for I think I said when we talked about it was after the first episode, I'm watching other things and they're really well executed. And I just don't feel like this was as well executed as I wanted it to be.
And I kept saying that originally they were going to do an 18 episode first season, and then I think they chopped it in half to make season 1 and season 2. So if this had been one season, maybe it would have been like, okay, now we hit episode 9, we're halfway through, now we're going to start rolling. But
yeah, maybe. I mean, that's possible, as well. I don't.
But that was weird too.
You don't know, like you don't
Yeah.
know, like all the back, the back and forth of it. So it's kind of hard to, say. You just have to react to what's there in front of you.
When they announced an 18 episode season, I was like, wait a minute. I'm like, nobody does that anymore. I'm like, are they really going to do that?
Right.
But
anyway, it was, like I said, good to see it. Good to see it got all the press. A lot of people seem to like it, so hopefully that becomes, an impetus to do more, and maybe align, with some of the things about the characters that feel a little bit righter. But anyway, that's my unenthusiastic, like, yeah, it was okay review.
I know Lilith was saying, with current day real life events, I know some of the Fisk stuff was hitting a little too close to home. So,
but that makes perfect sense. I mean, they lifted, if they lifted anything, they certainly lifted the Mayor Fisk, storyline. And really, wasn't that written during like Trump's like first sort of, isn't that around when that came out, when Chip and company, put that together? Because extrapolating that is like dead on. So
yeah.
So if people are saying, well, this seems like it's too much like this, well, it's kind of extrapolated from earlier, and that makes perfect sense. That's just the people watching the reading the tea leaves, as it were.
Oh, I know.
Building a story around it.
I used to like read or watch stuff like that, thinking, boy, this is a little far fetched. But yeah, these days It's like nothing surprises me. It's like, yeah, that could happen. That could happen.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and that does also probably take away some of the fun, maybe, of villainy of that. I can't watch like shows anymore where like a president or an administration is like going to get taken down.
Oh, really?
I couldn't imagine watching like 24 again, 24, which was like such a, fun rip of a show or anything like that, because it's like, really? That's doesn't seem like reality. Anyway, we can go down
Yes.
that rabbit hole and make it the Chichester gripes instead of the cat.
Yes, but yeah, no, we're here to talk about yes, another story from your Daredevil run. Yeah, Last Rites, or as everyone calls it, Fall of the Kingpin, 297 through 300.
Yep.
Yep.
I actually find, like, I find more people call it Last Rites than I would have expected.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I mean, it is on the covers.
Yeah, I know, but and it is on the Epic, collection where they put it all together. They decided to put that, that title on it. But I always felt sort of instinctively, well, people are going to refer to this as the Fall of the Kingpin, because that's what it is, and that's a lot of times what I've, called it out as a shorthand for it. But generally, when I see people at conventions and whatever, I would say 80-90% of them, refer to it by its proper name. So I think that's kind of interesting that that's what everybody keys into, which means we must have done something right.
Oh yeah, I mean, the story's good, the art. I mean, God, that cover for 300. That's
Oh yeah, that's like a banger.
Oh,
The
yeah.
original though is like, I had found this ad in like some of my dad's old stuff, nice proud father, I guess. And it was I sent it to Lee Weeks, and he didn't remember ever seeing it. It was like a newspaper ad. It must be like in the Comics Buyer's Guide or something. And it was just, Daredevil 300, it's going to be this special red tint cover, with whatever, not foil, but some kind of special printing process. And then, of course, the final one is very pink in some places.
Yeah.
So Lee was like, I said, "Do you ever remember this?" And he said, "I don't remember any." But he said, "They must have swapped the red for the pink. Pink must have been cheaper that day at the press." So I don't think he was super happy with the print job on the cover. But
I mean, I remember seeing that. I was just like, "This supposed to be light, like mood light, lighting."
Yeah.
Or, I don't know.
It was tricky. I mean, that you were still coding the colors in those days. You weren't getting, obviously, computer specific colors. So colorists like Max Shield or Christy Shield, were indicating, this is a mix of, so much percent yellow, so much percent red, so much percent whatever, and those are sent to the press. They would cut different sheets with that supposed percentage of those color values, and those get overlaid on each top of each other. And if they got it right, then you got the color close. But blending was hard. There were often mistakes, and if the editors were not reviewing them with precision, you would get off color stuff.
So this was still a day of like printing presses and stuff, or
Oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, like I said, you get back the colorists were coloring it, and Greg would go on, quite informatively, for forever, almost literally, talking about that color process in a great way. Because I mean, he sort of first rose to, I would say, fame as a colorist after being an editor. But you would color it with various dyes on Xerox copies of it, just again as a guide for the printing press. So the colorists would color it with these dyes, then they would code it, Y2 this, R2 this, C2 this, whatever the percentage was, and then they would again cut these, these overlays, which were then to be used to evaluate the color. And then you were supposed to judge those first and foremost. Are they accurate? as an editor, and then they would go to press on it, and then there was that point in time where they switched the papers. They went from newsprint paper to something called Flexo, I think, which was like this very stark white thing, and you got really ugly, bold, flat colors again from the press. And it wouldn't be until a little bit after Image started that they moved, aggressively into what would become, the strength of computer coloring. And then you're getting much more accurate colors, and you're getting, more exciting color effects, and they're upgrading the paper, and, they're doing all the things they were asking Marvel to do, and saying we're going to do it on our own now.
Yeah, I mean, Greg has it. Yeah, he has his whole thing about the colors and everything. That's what I said. Colorists, inkers. I mean, those are like the unsung jobs where it's just like, if people are doing their jobs, half the time people don't think about it. But, but if something goes wrong, then all of a sudden it's, oh, hey, what did this inker do? What did this colorist do? But,
oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they'll catch the blame, really quickly. But they've got to, they will elevate it, and bad ones will ruin it, and the good ones are unfortunately often like forced into a corner because they're some of the last people getting it. The process was, I mean, it's different now again, in terms of being able to do the coloring online can be done sort of in parallel to some other things, but then it was a process of writing, penciling, inking, coloring, lettering, and then the coloring. And sometimes you could skip the lettering stage as a discrete stage and do it on its own overlays. But again, that was rushing things, toward the end. So,
but yeah, I mean, the whole run right from the beginning, your run, I mean, like you and Lee were doing great work, but I don't know, for some reason it just hits me this story more than any other. I'm just like, man, these guys are so like meshed, such a well-oiled machine. You guys really seem like you're hitting your stride with this one.
yeah, I mean, this was the intent. This was the intention from winning the pitch. I mean, if you and you guys suggested it, so thank you again. I did add the original proposal as the giveaway at my storymaze.substack.com plug. So if you subscribe to that newsletter, you can get a copy of my original proposal for Daredevil, which won me the assignment, and this storyline is essentially that. I mean, there's actually like a lot of the bones and big parts of the muscles of that are sort of outlined in there of what was going to happen, running up to 300. I mean, I was looking ahead, and I was in my own head saying, if I get this book, 300 is going to be on the horizon. What do you do to make good on that? And also just the essence of taking down the Kingpin seemed like something that had been long overlooked and long overdue. So, because this was the first time that would happen to this degree in a way like this. So, those issues leading in, we couldn't do necessarily an 8-9 story arc, but in a lot of ways it is. I mean, there's a lot of things being set up in those early stories that pay off. The mobster, the Kingpin, kills at the end of this when the mobster Sabini, tries to, get in his face. Was set up earlier, for his revenge because the Kingpin, big surprise, mistreats him. The Hydra, agents that are manipulating the Kingpin to get into his servers and his computers and manipulate his situation and his money and whatever else, they're planted back in 292, 294 or whatever. They're you see them, being played out, and all those things are coming together. The Mad Dog Cass character who Daredevil like pushes, in the last couple episodes, last couple issues, get on the street and start the whisper effect, that the Kingpin is losing his power. He's introduced in I don't know, 292, 293. You know,
Yeah, Mad Dog. Yeah, I mean, for your first issue, so yeah,
right. So I mean, I was seeing the pieces, you know, and laying out the map of things. I mean, the routine of even the, you know, the little things like the you know, the blood on the hands thing he keeps coming back to. You know, those elements may not have been in the that proposal, but knowing you're going to this end goal, you know, allows you to start to kind of breadcrumb certain things out, or, you know, create little effects that you can echo later. So I think that's why I hope that's why it works so well.
And I mean, I love when other writers do this, but I mean, you call back to so much stuff from the last few years. It's like, you know, well, typhoids, you know, in this first issue, and then you
Right.
know that's called back to Anne, and then I mean, you're calling back to stuff from Frank Miller. So
Sure.
yeah, I'm just
Sure.
like, oh, I'm glad he didn't forget you know, the whole nuke thing, and you know, yeah, the Kingpin's been, I mean, he's been pulling his stuff even before that, but yeah, I mean the whole nuke thing and blowing up Hell's Kitchen was a big part of
Oh, of course. I mean, that was a hugely influential story for anybody in comics. You know, as a Daredevil fan, you know, equally as important. I mean, that storyline defined, you know, so much, and it's inescapable in its influence.
and that, I mean, and that's a big event where it's really got personal between these two.
Yeah, and that's what this,
Mhm,
this story in its own effect would not exist without that.
mhm.
But I mean, I hope and I believe it stands on its own. But it is a reflection of that. You know, it is a mirror thing. I mean, at one point, you know, the Kingpin even says, you know, quite consciously as he's murdering the guy, you know, getting blood on his hands. Well, I'm born again. You know, I mean, obviously that's a very direct,
Oh yeah.
you know, intentional callback. Um, you know, I wasn't trying to ape Frank Miller,
Mhm.
but I was acknowledging, you know, what was going on, and the you know, that was one of the things I enjoyed, and I think I was pretty good at, was taking little moments and extrapolating them, and certainly as I was trying to figure out, okay, so what is, you know, what is the you know, the final sort of like back and forth between them. I mean, there was that moment in Born Again where the Kingpin grabs the billy clubs that have been used to murder that cab driver
Mhm.
and hides them away somewhere. You know, he says, "I'm going to hide these away for a rainy day. You know, if I want to screw with what's left of Matt Murdock one more time, assuming he survives being dumped in the river, or if I just want to tarnish his reputation even further just for jollies on a random Sunday, um, I have this, you know, for me. This is like my, you know, my candy bar for later, you know, when I want to enjoy it." But, you know, but then that was a great just like Miller moment, but nothing was done with it. You know,
Exactly.
Frank Miller hadn't come back to do anything with it. Nobody else had sort of done it, but it's a great moment. So
Mhm.
it's sort of like you know, it's just like the opening scroll of, you know, the first Star Wars, you know, rebels, you know, gaining the plans for the Death Star and striking from a hidden base. And then that was John Knoll, you know, the guy who created Photoshop and one of the special effects people, going into Kathleen Kennedy and saying, "Hey, what happened with those stolen plans exactly?" You know, which leads you to Rogue One, right?
Mhm.
Which is then leads you to Andor. You know, so like a throwaway line,
Exactly.
you know, with enough weight behind it and that what if quality, you know, becomes something. So could there have been more done with those billy clubs? You know, I could have gone down another story and made it
Oh yeah.
about actually the Kingpin. You know, today's writer might have done more with that. That might have been an 8-issue story. That might have
Mhm.
been he realizes halfway through, Matt Murdock is fucking with me. I'm going to get the billy clubs out. I'm going to start fucking with him. You know, and then that could have led to a different conclusion. My use of them becomes sort of more of a MacGuffin.
Mhm.
You know, it's a convenient plot device, but it's in Hitchcock speak, but it's still to me, you know, that's why it meshes nicely, and it works even if you don't know it, because Lee
Yeah.
plays out that scene. We establish what it's all about. It's not just a line, you know.
Mhm.
We made sure the reader could follow along.
And I think it works well into like the central plot of the story because Matt even says, I think at some point, this guy has to go down, not even just because he's evil, just because, but also because, he knocked my life down once. And if he's not out of the picture, if I try to rebuild a life, he's just going to come around and try to knock it down again.
Right. And that's the Matt / Daredevil and not even separate parts, because I think there's a lot of tandem, rereading this for this in detail, like, not just like sort of casually skimming, through it. I think there's much more fusion between them, than normally. Sometimes it's like the lawyer goes up to a line, we've talked about this before. The lawyer goes up to a line, the law can't handle it, so Daredevil comes out to handle it, or Daredevil handles it in his way, but then there's a line that you don't want to go further, so he passes the billy club or the baton back to Matt Murdock. He's not schizophrenic, obviously, but I mean, that there's that sort of thing. But I think, there's a much more of a fusion between the two of them here, where the manipulation going on is Matt Murdock. That's that, and the manipulation is really key to the story. He's screwing with things and playing both sides against the middle. If anything, this is like a fistful of dollars for a few dollars more territory. This is like Clint Eastwood, like, or Yojimbo, to go back to the source material. Somebody like that, and choosing to be ruthless, choosing, that I have to go beyond things. I'm not going to kill people for this, but I am going to turn off like the moral compass and do these things that need to be done. And that's also why I, use the Machiavelli quotes, at the beginning, and was that sense of, Machiavelli not just being ruthless in his historical, aspect, but that was sort of the tenet of it, right? The prince, the person who protects the city, needs to be a bad person, essentially, needs to do terrible things in order to protect the city, in order to protect the populace. And that's why, I think he goes so hard. I mean, the typhoid thing is,
that's what I was going to mention. Yeah, the typhoid thing. Yeah.
That's seducing her, to screw with her head, is not a nice guy, move.
Yeah, I mean, the execution wasn't the most nice thing in the world to do, but I mean, in the end, she was getting, she was going to get mental,
Yes,
some mental help. But
yeah, he set her up to go into like social services, and it's funny, you're not the first person to sort of try to give that a pass by saying, well,
I'm not saying it's a pass, but I'm just saying, the ends are good, but it's just the means to get there.
It's brutal. I mean, it's a terrible move, but it's a necessary move. And yes, he does set her up so she's not just like coming to and left like in a shitty hotel room in Queens or wherever, and like, what's going on? Where am I? Because he really wants her taken off the table, because she could turn back to, typhoid maybe in a heartbeat. But by having her dragged away and put in, isolation, no doubt she breaks out. I don't know how people brought typhoid back to the table afterwards. I stupidly did not use her again, which was stupid. But that pulling her into social services, getting her locked up on the Mary mental health side of it. Yes, there's help for her there, and he sort of says that, but he knows in his heart that this is still a shit move, but a move that had to happen, because how else are you going to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I always took it. I mean, with Kingpin, he's so corrupt and ruthless, and maybe typhoid to a certain extent, but she was just so damaged and broken too. Where Matt's just like, I can't just handle these two like it's every day,
Right, and you don't want an everyday story. Otherwise, why are we reading this? Why are we spending time with this? And that was sort of the point for me, again, was to take us someplace different. And Matt acting like this and Daredevil acting like this was in line in some ways, but different different in others.
Oh, you could tell. I mean, I love the first scene from the first issue because, again, I mean, Matt had been pretty serious up until this point, but again, he's trying to throw Kingpin off. So Kingpin walks into his dark office. Daredevil just has his feet up on his desk. He's like, "Oh, how's it hanging, Willie?" And
Right.
holding one of his cigars.
A line which almost like which Bob Budiansky, I remember, was playing editor-in-chief. Bob was one of the senior, editors, and Tom DeFalco was out that week that the editor-in-chief is supposed to review the books before they go out. And I remember he came into the office and he was like, "This line has got to go," because he was thinking Willie was misconstrued as like, Fisk's junk or something. And but by that point the book had already gone to press, so it was too late.
Hey, his name's Wilson, Willie, come on.
Exactly. That was my counter argument. But it was but that fucking with him from moment one is both integral to the story. He's got to get inside his head very quickly. We've got to get inside his head very quickly, and to make the story work. And I think that's like over the years I've sort of come to appreciate myself. Your show here has probably helped me do that more than some things. And that's one of the things if I have to define what did I do with Daredevil, that's one of the things. I think there is that risky, I'm going to poke you aspect to it, not just the devil of redemption, not just the dark side stuff. I like that irascible, like, I'm just going to keep screwing with people quality. That's the I'm daring you, right? As much as I'm taking the dare and taking the risks, like, come on, do it. I think that's a intuitively that was a lawyer thing too, right? That feels like somebody who knows how to manipulate people, who knows how to, even though he was on the defense side, right? He's not trying to nail like somebody like a criminal. He's defending them. He's still manipulating people, right? He's manipulating the jury. He's manipulating his clients, when he shows up for court, if at all. Because
I mean, that's all the law. I mean, everything attorneys are, right? It's just like, okay, you're going to believe my side of events, not their side of events.
Right. And that's, I mean, I was able to play that out later in Black Armor, coming back to what I always wanted to do later, even with the scenes he's doing with Zabo. I don't need to convince him. I just need to introduce reasonable doubt, and that's all. And here but that's manipulation is physical with typhoid, it's mental with things on the street, and ultimately really to kind of wind Fisk up, and then, wind Hydra up for that matter.
Oh, yes.
Because once he finds out that Hydra is part of the picture, he doesn't go down the road that Fury wants him to go down. He goes down his own road and says, I'm going to get them both going at each other.
Yes, because the second issue, yes, we see Nick Fury not so gently bring Matt in, and
yeah,
I guess he's Nick doesn't want Shield to be seen, messing with Hydra, but he's like, Hydra's kind of already in bed with Kingpin, so he's gonna wind Matt up and send, so hopefully he'll mess with the both of them, and then
right, and then Matt turns it around and says, "No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to set them against each other."
Matt says, "You started this, but guess what?"
Right. Which gives you, I mean, again, reading it again and appreciating it, I mean, we and no short part of or small part of appreciating it is, Lee Weeks and what Lee did with the characters and the layouts and the body language and everything he always brings to a page. Is just dynamite and real, right? It feels both over the top and exciting and big superhero adventure, but at the same time feels so grounded, and you feel every impact, you feel every lean against the wall I mean, small moments, big moments. And that allowed me, I think, to script things that were, because remember, this would have been Marvel plot style. This would have been writing detailed plot, Lee illustrating it, comes back to me, and that's where I dialogue it and write the captions. And some of that I had in mind. I wish I knew exactly what, but as we know, I don't have those plots anymore. But certain things come out of looking at Lee's artwork, and that's where you get, I think, lines that nail scenes. I always try to structure scenes so they would end on effective moments, but ending an issue or something on Nick Fury saying like "fire in the hole" or whatever, just sets things up. It's just really kind of gives you like a sense of momentum between issues, so that the story, I think, continues in a powerful way.
Oh yeah, I mean, the end of the issue too. Yeah, it's basically Matt just saying, you know what? No, you tried to manipulate me. I'm going to do things my way, and then just leaps off the, off the roof.
Right.
Yeah, that's always an effective superhero. Yeah, last
Exactly.
line. Yeah,
Exactly. Screw you. You set this in motion. So, which is fun. I mean, that was fun too, because especially the way the issue, or that part starts. As you said, with Fury being Fury, taking him down. I'm in control. I'm Shield. We know how to play all the angles. You can't possibly see, all the angles like we do. But in essence, here's a guy. Well, I don't need to see. Like to know all the angles. Intuitive. Certainly thematically, that's there. I might have played that out a little bit more directly, but maybe it's just the right balance anyway. But that then shifts the story from a Shield playing things, story, to showing Daredevil's got command of the situation.
And again, I always love your use of the senses, like in issue 3 when the Fury's spying on Matt and Karen, and I don't know how far away they are, but Matt's just like, quit buying such cheap cigars, Fury.
Right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's and to go back to the Born Again TV show, like I wanted more of that. I wanted more of his senses working the room, working the situation, bringing things together and in and such. But that's whatever they've chosen to do.
I don't know, because like when me and Lilith were talking with Greg, the one episode with Muse where Matt's just like feeling like the blood paintings. We're like, what does he feel? How can you get a clear picture from like these
I don't know.
drawn in
I mean,
blood?
I took a pretty good beating in there's that great book. If you guys have seen that book, right? Being Matt Murdock.
Yes.
And that the author does a wonderful job overall of like explaining the senses, and she beats up on me pretty hard actually for the scene in Last Rites right here, where he reads the phosphors on the screen, to like the pages in a newspaper. His fingers like tracking the letters, which seemed like it made sense, but she takes me to task, rightly so. But so I don't know what you're going to do from an entire Muse thing. Now, if he had, used that to sort of, I don't know, smell the blood or something like that, or had somebody to play off of to explain it, or maybe used that, world on fire radar sense to sort of track the depths perhaps of the paint, maybe to get almost like a thermograph image off of it. That would have been something, but they didn't really go into that.
Yeah, or even somehow play it up where he can't tell what it is, but he can tell it's blood,
Yeah, maybe that's what they were going for, but certainly that's what they were going for, but not for us to question why.
Hey, don't beat yourself up too. I mean, other people do it. Greg was telling us about how he did a Daredevil story, and at the end, Daredevil's standing on top of the roof or something. And he can says something about or thinks about seeing the city. And he's just
right. Yeah, but Greg being Greg, he takes, like some people try to give him a pass on it. Oh, you must have been using C metaphorically, and he's like, no, I just made a mistake. And an editor didn't catch it, and he didn't forget that Daredevil couldn't see, but it's the way you write it, and you have to always be careful about, like I see something, but it's it's been many years since I could see that, or I see it in my mind's eye, or something like like that. I mean, I think I do that at the end of this. I think that at the end of Last Rites, when he's seeing the Fisk comes to visit him in his new office,
Mhm.
and he says, I see him for the first time. Obviously he's not seeing him, but he's seeing him because he's never seen the Kingpin, right? He's never physically seen the Kingpin. He's never met the Kingpin where he could see him. He's
Mhm.
long since blind. So that was well played out by Lee and Max Shield and everybody else in the color effects. Al Williamson, let's not forget the great Al Williamson, just bringing
Yeah.
the power of his inks to this. I mean, a great pairing with Lee. Great.
Oh yeah. Oh, and you also introduced a new supporting character, Kathy Malper.
Well, Kathy Walper, I loved. I would bring her back several times. A couple times at least. I mean, I brought her back, I think, in the last story I did with Lee for 380, and she was just a fun character, and she was
Mhm.
a real character because I can't remember if we've talked about this before, but in part of my research and such, I came across, and this is not even trying, to kind of move the needle at all. There was a real federal investigator, a real FBI federal investigator named Kathy Palmer, or maybe it
Mm.
was Cindy Palmer. It was so close, and she was a Red Sox fan, and she had been targeted by the drug lords, with a shotgun and a briefcase, and she was called the Dragon Lady for going after these Asian drug cartels. So I lifted her identity, almost pure play, to give Matt and Daredevil like a support character, and to figure out a God in the machine, Deus Ex Machina moment where we could get his law license back.
Mhm.
Um, and I came into the Marvel offices one day, and the receptionist up front was like, "Oh, you got a message? The FBI called." And and it was like, "Oh my God, what?" And I knew immediately what it had to be in reference to. So I called back the special agent, and I was like, "What's going on?" And he was like, "Yeah, we read this comic book, and we work with, you know, Kathy Palmer, or what, whatever her real name was, and is that based on her?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, I think you're an FBI agent. I think you probably already figured that out." But they weren't they weren't going to drag me. Nowadays they might drag me down, but at that point he was just amused by it, and I think I was trying to finagle a meeting with her, sort of "Oh, could I meet her in person?" And
Mhm.
uh, but it never came together. But it was still one of those, just, "Oh, the FBI called."
So they didn't have a problem with it. They were just like, "Oh, hey, yeah." They were just
No, I mean,
curious.
the guy was like I said, the agent who called me and then I called back, was on her task force.
Oh, okay.
So he was a comics fan, or a Daredevil fan, and so had read the story, and clearly, like I said, I
Mhm.
barely masqueraded. I mean, I gave her character and I let her play out the rest of what she did.
Mhm.
That was all my imagination, but the hooks, like the Red Sox and the shotgun incident, and the Dragon Lady, such, those were all my jumping off points. I said, this is such a rich character. I was reading a book about RICO investigations, or mobs in New York, or something like that, and so it was just part of my usual kind of oh, put this in a notebook, use this later. And then when I needed a character like that, she was ready to kind of roll. But they weren't you know you're not getting grilled for this. It was just sort of is this her?
Yeah, no, I just some of the details, like the Red Sox stuff. I'm like, okay, this is probably a real person. I'm like, is this
Yeah, oh,
somebody
very
you
much so.
knew, or was just yeah,
No,
you
very
based it
much
off
so.
someone? Yeah.
No, she was definitely that was, just so many, interesting little bits like that coming together. That's the personality stuff you either spend your time uh uh establishing, so somebody's got some dimension to them, or you steal it from somebody in real life, and you put it on top of somebody else.
Yeah, I mean that penultimate issue. I mean, it's interesting. Again, you get that whole first scene with Kathy Mulper, and then the beginning, just Matt masquerading as the mob pole shark.
Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, playing things out. I mean, Lee did a great job with all the ricocheting stuff. The pinballs and
Mhm.
the billiard balls and all that. Um, I don't know. I think that works. Like uh, in terms of like all these things are pinging off each other and ricocheting off each other as the metaphor was meant to be. To show what Matt has set in motion. I wonder, looking at it again, if it's exactly the right balance, but what it was supposed to achieve, it achieves. To again, he's put all this stuff in motion. Now it's on a collision course, and he's going to be there to pick up the pieces or do that final prod. That final prod, being that he, he knows the billy clubs are out there,
Mhm.
and he knows that they can be used against him. So he wants to take that last thing off the table and also use it to manipulate the Kingpin one last time,
Mhm.
and offer him this deal, which never exists, um, to clear the Kingpin's name. And he just, of course, sees that as one last chance to, well, of course, I'm going to manipulate the corridors of power. That's what I do.
Mhm.
But
And then I'm just like scrolling through 300 here. I mean, yeah, so much stuff happens in 300. Well, we get special guest stars, J. Jonah Jameson and well Peter Parker.
yeah, Peter shows up. Yeah,
Mhm.
but that's like that's the diversity of the Marvel universe.
Oh
If you
yeah,
you can
yeah.
think about it ahead in the right way, you can draw anybody you want into a story, not having it to be like a major guest star, but just sort of like populating the things. And whatever Mary Jane doesn't say, you should become Spider-Man. She's like, no, I can't remember the exact line, but it's like, shouldn't you do your thing? It's like, no, he's got it covered. If you know who Peter Parker is, which you got to figure 95% of comic readers do,
Yeah.
it's a good bit. But if you don't, then you're like, what's that guy? And then you move on. It's one line. It's not like a whole page or something.
Yeah, I think it's just Peter's just like, yeah, hit him, hit him again.
Yeah, hit him for me. Hit him for me, red guy. Hornhead.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, there's little just moments like that, but it very much is. Somebody asked me once, when we started the stories right back to 292, we kind of came out of the gate with guest stars,
Mhm.
Ghost Rider, Punisher, and certainly part of that, as always, was a tactical move. Make sure to look at our book, look, new writer, Lee's transitioning, from working with Anne, uh, pay attention to us. And somebody had said, well, shouldn't you have saved the guest stars for the end, to really kind of ramp it up, which would have been that. But I was going to say that would have been sort of like the fall from grace like formula, but we just sort of like fire hosed that. But the story had to become more about Kingpin and Daredevil. It
Oh
had
yeah.
to become more directly intimate and manipulative, as it goes on. He continues to manipulate him like right through to the end. He shows up in the courtroom scene. Matt does, at one point while the Kingpin is growling from having been forced on the stand, and again he's behind him like smiling, like with that little like, you know I'm coming for you, Willie, like
Yeah, then he
thing.
like does the disappearing act. Yeah.
Right, so he continues to turn the gear, and
Mhm.
it's just the right place and the right balance, I think, for
Oh yeah.
myself. A year later, I would have, I mean, there's some places it's overwritten, but not by much.
Oh.
But a year later, I might have like started to overwrite things too much. I might have like had explain things. Like he comes, he goes, he disappears. That sort of thing, as if I needed to kind of telegraph things. But him just showing up and vanishing is just the right
Mhm.
balance of it. Trusting the reader, to follow along was the right instinct.
Mhm. I mean, yeah, and again, I mean, just the subtle ways, when like when Kingpin goes to get those billy clubs and Daredevil just stands there and confronts him and then gets him worked up enough where Kingpin just like smacks him and he says, "I've done nothing wrong." And
Right.
then just that pain on Mount wiping the blood off his face. He's just like, "Now you have."
Right.
It's
Right.
like, oh, it's coming now. Here's the big fight.
Yeah.
We all
And
know.
in front of everybody, right? That
Mhm.
was the thing, you know, it was like, here you
Oh,
are in this
security
grimy,
cameras, everything. Yeah.
yeah, shittiest of shitty public spaces, because Port Authority is, you know, like a mini mall these days, but in those days was, you know, was a public hellhole. Like, you did not want to go into Port Authority or through Port Authority.
That's where those senses come in handy, or just describing the urine, trying to track Kingpin through the urine smell, and
Oh yeah, and that was,
Mhm.
believe me, that was all that I didn't need hypersenses to to cue that. And I think I've told you this story before, but you know, I walked that fight like
Mm,
that's Lee's artistry in
mhm,
that fight. But Lee didn't have photo reference of Port Authority. I had, you know, I lived in New York City. I'd spent a lot of time in Port Authority.
mhm,
um, I knew where I want to kind of track the fight, you know, describing they're going to go down this corridor, they're going to go over this escalator, they're going to smash into this kinetic sculpture. Um, but Lee had no photo reference, so I had to go to shitty Port Authority and have my friend Bill Battle, which is why he's in the special thanks, um, and watch my back while I was taking photos with a big clunky 35 millimeter
uh,
camera, which probably would have been stolen from me
oh,
because I was focusing on like getting the shots to give Lee, so he would have like a full range, like, you
mhm,
know, of you know, this is the escalator, this is the corridor, this is the machine, like from every angle, so that he could then choose what he chose to do.
mm,
I wish I could remember. I mean, Mark Grunwald was always a good influence, but
mm.
I don't know why he's in the credit box. Like, you know, it's a special thanks to Mark Grunwald and Bill Battle, but I don't know like why you know, Mark is called out there, like something he suggested or something he, you know, I mean, man, I'm happy he's there, but you know, there would be something, but I can't remember what it is. If I
No, Mark Grunwald might be like reference, like, oh, hey, it's something happened between Matt and Kingpin like 10 years ago in this issue.
maybe
Or,
it could have been something like that. You know, I mean, if I have a chance to see Ralph, um, you know, in person, I talked to him on a podcast not too long ago. But Ralph Macchio, the editor, he might he might remember, but he might not just as well.
and then of course, this issue 300 gave us that, well, according to Lee Weeks, that controversial ending. I forgive you.
Right, right. And yes, and I've told you that story before, but
Mm,
yeah, that was a point of controversy between me and Lee, where he did not agree with that line at the time. He would later kind of come to see the genius of it, if you will. But that's again, I think the collaborative
mhm,
beauty of that back and forth, right? The plot, the art, the script. Um, that line I could tell you for sure was not in the plot. You know,
mm,
it was a full page splash, I'm sure. It was, you know, Daredevil standing over the fallen Kingpin, the barrels burning, the billy clubs are, you know, ashes, whatever. That would have been the description.
mhm,
But it was in seeing what Lee had done, that's where I forgive you came out of. And
mm.
so, like, Lee is to blame slash thank, you know, for that. And that's where I think, you know, you get to me at least, the best moments. Because if I had to script that out
Mm,
all ahead of time, maybe ultimately that would have come out, you know, as I was sort of sitting there like scratching my head, thinking about what's going to be said and such, but a much more organic, effective way to see
mhm.
it and experience it for myself, and then represent a line like that and all it means.
So was that Lee's idea or yours? That like that page, there is no background on that.
No, that would have been Lee. I mean, I would have described probably exactly what I just said, you know,
Yeah.
like, you know, Daredevil standing over the fallen Kingpin, you know, barrel burning, but Lee's decisions there. And as you just call out, the starkness of it, right? The choice to silhouette it out, to use that white space, so effectively, narrows it into the moment even more between the two of them. This has all come down to this, right? And that drew those lines out as well, like that where he says it's all come down to this, all these things, all these moments, all this happening, and in the same way, then I know it was Lee's favorite line in the book, because he called me as soon as he read it, and the lead Ralph had sent him the script or whatever. But it's earlier on where the Kingpin looks over his shoulder, like he's just totally like ruined, and then it just cuts to the the DD emblem, much as you're wearing right now. And and then the lines are, a man filled with panic and a man without fear. And that again wasn't in the script. It was just look at the look on Fisk's face, right? And then once you write and a man filled with panic, then the logical thing is, of course, a man without fear. And Lee loved that. If I did nothing else right, Lee will give me credit for that. But that's the exchange. That's the back and forth that only comes from from that type of way of doing things.
Yeah, I mean, and again, thank you, sir. I mean, this story lives in my head again, probably because it's early in my Daredevil reading. When I first started reading, because I started a little bit towards the end of Ann's run and stuff. And again, I love this story. It lives in my head. It's like I went back to reread this. I'm like, I guess I should refresh myself. But I'm like, I've read this story so many times, I know what happens.
Yeah, but no, well, thank you. I mean, thank you, for what you've done with this whole show, for me, but also like revisiting this was, really, really great. And I'm gonna say this is a better constructed story right now than the Born Again TV show.
I'll go with that. I'll go with that.
It's like, this is the beats I want that show to deliver on. I think there's something to be learned, from that.
Oh God, I was gonna say I'd be all down for that. But did you see the speculation? I mean, there was that one episode at the end. Matt had his old Daredevil closet on the roof with all this stuff. Yeah. And people were speculating, well, this helmet goes with this suit, and there was like a silver one, and people were saying, oh, is that the black armor? Is that the black armor? We're gonna see black armor.
Oh, I think I saw that graphic where it was like the helmets, and then somebody had dropped the costume illustrations below. Yeah, cool if so, whatever if not. I don't.
I mean, that thing seems to be making a comeback. I mean, you did write the the mini series, and then they are using it in the current book right now. So
yeah, no, it's definitely been quote unquote redeemed. It's not wasn't gone again for 30 years. They definitely brought it back to the comic. I don't know how they used it, if it was a gimmick or if hopefully nobody cut it up with scissors again.
No. It's actually the reverse. I mean, Matt kind of says something about well, after the last arc, he's like, "Oh, the suit's trash. It's covered in blood." So he actually goes to the black armor. So actually, the red suit was trashed, and he goes to the.
Where does he get the suit from?
He really doesn't say. They really don't spell it out. I know. That's what I was like. I'm like,
all right,
we talked about this enough. That thing was destroyed. So
no, that's it. That's the funny thing, because I mean, I never heard back from the Daredevil office again. Even though I teased a few things out, but I always said in my mind's eye, like Potter would have made one more.
Yeah.
Potter would have had like a backup suit, or even whatever happened after Daredevil Black Armor, where clearly that in continuity that would have been destroyed. If Potter would have had one more suit, that he could have gone to, so that would have been a moment. But that's the perfect use of the suit. I mean, that's what you just described was essentially what we did in Fall from Grace, right? He gets the suit trashed. He realizes I can't go back out there against the Silver Sables and the Venoms and the Hellspawns in this. I need something better, and that's the exact same logic that leads to that. But
I mean, yeah, there's a whole splash page of him swinging around in it, and I know you're too mature, but everyone, we could bombard Warren Ellis with that page.
With what the
the full splash page from the new issue. It's just him swinging around in the black.
oh, I'm sure Ellis could have cared less. I mean,
Yeah,
one way or the other. I don't know Warren at all, but I'm sure it was like, because it's not like he continued on the book. It was like that one
no,
issue.
it was like one issue. Yeah, yeah.
Right. So
I mean, Lilith and I reviewed it, and we said it just seemed like, I don't know, like we're like, did he just have like the worst day of his life and then sat down
No,
and wrote this issue? I mean,
I
but
guarantee
yeah,
you.
it just seems so angry that you're writing almost. Not even just that scene. It was just
Well, I mean, I guarantee you, like, because Marie was friends with the Brits,
mhm,
Warren, Grant Morrison, I think, like, she had, made friendships with a lot of that group and brought a lot of them over. So I think Warren was probably an easy. I'm sure Bobby Chase said, like, get rid of this fucking costume, you know, and Warren was an easy call. Like, you doing anything? No. Do you want to write this issue? What do I need to do? I don't even know Daredevil or something like that. Just destroy this costume. So for uh, a whatever a enfant terrible, of that British type of writer, like taking the piss out of everything would been a joy, right? Like, let's just
mhm.
like spend 22 pages destroying this costume and taking the piss out of it. Like, and you're going to pay me for it? I mean, why not? Like, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to worry about continuity. Like, he probably wrote it like in an hour. And
Oh yeah,
and I
maybe.
mean, I don't know that, but I'm reading between the lines of of like, I don't have to set anything up except that this costume is shit and we have to get rid of it. And nobody cared enough to sort of, on the editorial side, because they just wanted rid of it for some reason, to sort
Mhm,
of say, well, wait a minute, this thing is supposed to be super tough. How's he cutting it up with scissors and razor blades and whatever else? That makes no sense. They didn't care about it. They just wanted rid of it.
mhm.
And so, I mean, I didn't necessarily agree with the psychopomp, stuff that Mark DeMatteis did, but I respect Mark, and
Oh
I
yeah.
saw what he was trying to do. Um, and Mark tried to extend that out a little bit. Like, Mark played that out, psychologically, as he often does. But yeah, the Ellis thing was, to me, was like laughable. And
Mhm.
but so I don't even think he would. It's not like that was his mission in life, to destroy that costume. I'm sure it was like an easy paycheck.
Yeah.
You
And I
know,
was gonna say Jam only had like 6 issues, so I think they were just like, "Okay, here's the mission, get him back to status quo," by
right,
the 350, yeah.
right. So, but yeah, I mean, it's cool to see it show up in the regular continuity, and maybe it then becomes just like it was always intended to be,
Mhm,
this sort of thing that comes out in the right situations. If he's suddenly sent to a secret wars planet and, he needs more protection than this, he packs that along with him. Or so if it's in play, that's cool. Um, but I think we did our job, me and Netho, and we redeemed it. Hasbro did its job. They redeemed it with an awesome toy. Um, Target did its job. They redeemed it with a cool little Funko, and we did our job and redeemed it with a good story that allows people to say, "Hey, this looks great." A story with this is not anything except another type of Daredevil story. So more power to it.
yes. Hey, I cherish my, Black Armor Funko, or Fall from Grace, as they call it, with my Chichester signature on it.
And I know it's like it's fun. I like it. I got mine. My little guy right here.
Nice.
Me and my black light. So
Alright.
anyway, so
I
we're
was gonna
good.
say, we could cut that there, again, excellent job, excellent story,
Thank you.
sir.
Thank you.
Uh, but the most important question, sir, is what are you working on right now?
Well, funny you should ask, Phil. So this week, coming out on Tuesday at your local, or Wednesday, what's local comic shop day? Wednesdays.
Wednesday, yeah.
So Risk, RYSK, #1, part of a 5-issue series from Black Box Comics. It's a cool cyber thriller heist adventure, and takes place in the near future. There it is. Look at that. And that everybody's been ruined. They've got these crazy augments to kind of rebuild parts of their bodies. And our main character, Ruby Chance, has been somehow infused with a separate personality called Risk, which gives her the edge to see strategies and overcome her enemies, you know, throughout. So it's a fun rip. It's a, you know, different genre for me to play things out in a straight way. And you can either get it at your shop if they have it. If they're not carrying it, ask them to carry it. We've got 4 more issues after this first one. And if for some reason they're not, if you go to blackboxcomics.net, you can order it directly from them and leave a review. Let us know what you think.
Yes, and speaking of reviews, can we review this for the next episode?
Surely. Did I send you this guys? This I'll send you. You know, I'll send it to you, so
Okay.
you got it for that. You can go get a copy too if you want, or ask your local comic shop to order it. But yes, that would be fun. That would be a good one to get into. Excellent.
All right. Any words on Axel's Infernal #2?
Nope, still kicking along on the pre-launch. You know, people can go to axelsinfernal.com or tinyurl.com/axelsinfernal to get to the pre-launch page on Kickstarter, where, you know, the numbers are ticking up slow, but they're moving. I'm doing some more promotional things on it to try to get those numbers up there. There we go, right there. And you know, the issue's done. Not completely colored or lettered, but all the art's done. We're just holding back on those last stages, which will go very quickly once we're ready to kind of put it into gear. No pun intended for a road trip to hell story, but you know, please check that out. We got a cooking trailer and a lot of the artwork's up there, so you can see what you're getting into.
I mean, yeah, I love #1. I was like, man, where are we getting #2? But again, it's like when you don't have like the big machine behind you, it takes some time and some doing to get an issue, right? Yeah,
it takes time, you know, and then you get to the point of like, okay, now you're done. What do you do with it? You know, how do you finance it yourself? You know,
got to promote everything yourself. You got shipping and all that fun stuff.
It's an enterprise unto its own, which is part of the game. So I understand that, but it does take you longer if you want to try to, like in this case of the Kickstarter, raise a certain amount of money to even just cover your costs, right? You know, because while Carl Waller is the artist, you know, myself are not part of the financial, like we haven't factored our fees into it. You know, we have to factor in Wes Wong, who's doing the colors. We have to factor in Pat Brousseau, who's doing the letters. We have to factor in the printing, which is now more expensive. We have to factor in the shipping, you know, so there's certain hard costs that you have to, you know, if you don't raise the money on, then you're stuck. And unfortunately, there's not a print on demand service for comics in the same way that there's like a print on demand service for, say, books. You know, if I was to write a book, you know, then I could do it. I could have it on like an Amazon printed on demand. Comics, you've got to do a press run of whatever, you know, 100 copies, which can be several hundred, well, almost $1,000 or more probably. So, yep. So, but moving along.
All right. So, but yes, next time we will talk Risk #1. So
excellent. All right, I'll get that off to you guys and check it out. And then I'm going to want your review before we start talking, so that we can throw sound bites down as you know, as well. So like, you don't have to review it before the show, but I want you to, you know, get into your thoughts. So that's your assignment.
Okay. And of course, I'll be happy to share audio with the episode with you if you want to cut any of that up. So.
Excellent, terrific. All right, listen, have a great rest of the weekend. Happy Easter if that's your thing, and we will schedule our next show depending on what you throw at me.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
you so much. Lilith. Sorry we missed her.
Yeah. Little under the weather, but yes, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Phil. All right, be good.
You too. We'll see you next month.
All right, bye-bye.